Hey, what's up, everybody? Good morning, good morning, good morning. This is Coffee Conversations with Greg J. This is Wednesday, April 29th. Just doing a date check, a day check. We're in our coronavirus quarantine, our lockdown, our uh, stay at home, safer at home, and all that stuff. Whatever it is, we can't go outside. Let me just turn off my Facebook Live. You can hear us at you can hear us on Facebook Live at Columbus on Coffee, Beach City Radio, Beach City Perspective. You can also get us on YouTube with this live stream. So hopefully you'll be able to tell a friend. And today we've got a really, really great show. We'll get to it in just a hot second. Before we get to it, we got some headlines for you from the Associated Press. Unions in the U.S. meatpacking industry say President Trump is jeopardizing lives by prioritizing cold cuts over workers' health. That's because he issued an executive order to keep these meat processing plants open despite COVID-19 concerns. From the LA Times, advocates for seniors and the disabled blasted Governor Gavin Newsom's administration for advising hospitals to prioritize younger people over older people with greater life expectancy. The Final Call newspaper convened an online forum of scholars, activists, and advocates from Senegal, South Africa, Uganda, Kenya, Cuba, and the Sudan, as well as Chicago and Philadelphia. That summit was called COVID-19, what is it called? Africa, the Economic Ramifications of Coronavirus Pandemic. California Black Media reports that Black restaurants across California can participate in a new state program that contracts them to prepare food and deliver meals to vulnerable seniors during the COVID-19 pandemic. Today is April 29th. It is Duke Ellington's birthday. He was born 121 years ago. These stories and more inside the Beach City Perspective section on beachcityradio.com. Music for your soul, conversation for your mind. Speaking of Duke Ellington, that's an important part of American pop culture, that's for sure. We've got an incredible guest for you today. We're going to sit down, sip our coffee, and have a great conversation. Dr. Daniel Walker is an acclaimed historian, filmmaker, scholar, and theologian, social entrepreneur, and overall good guy, channeling intellect, creativity, and a passion for social justice. He makes good things happen. He is the author of the critically acclaimed book, No More, No More, Slavery and Cultural Resistance in Havana and New Orleans. And he's the writer and director of several films, including When Roosters Crow, The 10, Soul Brothers, Let's Have Church, and he's the board chair of BLU Educational Foundation. He's the founder of the Gospel Music History Archive at the University of Southern California, Go Trojans, and the founder and director of the Long Beach International Film and Music Festival. Let's bring in Dr. Daniel E. Walker. What's going on there, sir? How are you this morning?
I'm doing good, Greg.
Morning.
Good.
Right on, brother. Man, I'm doing all right. I'm glad to be among the living, as they say.
Yes. It brings a new meaning, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Absolutely. Well, listen, we really want to get into it today with you. Man, I mean, you have so many accolades, and I'm sitting here reading all this stuff. I'm like, does he ever sleep?
A lot.
Right, very well, he said. That's right. Yes, man. So listen, what about yesterday I kind of got a chance to really listen a bit about to your class that you had, your online class. You're teaching, I guess, history over there at El Camino College, and
Yep.
I kind of dipped in and out of your class there, ear hustling, and you were talking about the Harlem Renaissance. And as we commemorate Duke Ellington's 121st birthday, I thought
Yeah.
that would be a good place for us to start today. with the Harlem Renaissance. Talk to us a little bit about that period of time, because you know what? We may, after this pandemic, come out and have a similar time of history within our culture.
Yeah, well, first off, thank you once again for inviting me to be on the show today. Coffee Conversations with Greg J. All right. And for all of the accolades that you gave me, brother, I'm sending them all back to you, because I don't know when you sleep. Given all the projects that, so anybody who's watching, me and Greg live in the same city, and we be on the hustle, and we'll just be walking down the street and see each other, and then just be like, "What you got going?" And then we just got to keep going and fast. So this brother's always doing something positive, and I am more than blessed and happy to be here today. So let me start with that. Number two, I appreciate it is Duke Ellington's birthday. I mean, what a coincidence, right? Right. So the class you tuned in on, I teach at El Camino College, and the class was my African-American history class, 1877 to the present. And we were talking about the Harlem Renaissance, and it's kind of crazy because I won't use the word stuck, but we got to move on and get to other stuff. But it's such and a beautiful expression of both creativity. It is a beautiful expression of the internal dynamics of what it means to be an African American, where they're literally fighting about how we should be represented. And we think about media today, and we think about images that we have on television or in film or on the radio or in print media still, and how we work through those issues internally, right? That we have our own kind of vetting session that we go through, right? And if you're going to be invited to the cookout or not, given how we represent. And so the Harlem Renaissance, it's an explosion in artistic expression in the 1920s, keyed by individuals like W.B. Du Bois, Charles S. Johnson, Elaine Locke, and highlighted by individuals like Zora Neale Hurston, Countee Cullen, Langston Hughes, and music like jazz, and the fact that we forget that in American history, they call the 20s the jazz age. When you think about African Americans, this was only 60 years after the end of slavery, and our cultural production was so great, embraced by all, that we turned, literally, I'm a historian, and when we in a history book, we talk about the 20s as either the roaring 20s or we call it the jazz age. So just thinking about today and moving forward and coming out of COVID and all of these types of things, or being in and looking at what our creativity has been even in the midst of it. I mean, I think about D Nice. I think about Teddy Riley versus Babyface, right? I think about all these things of expression. And when you look back to the Harlem Renaissance, you say, we ain't new to this.
Right.
So that's my biggest thing about the Harlem Renaissance. It's like, we ain't new to this. It just shows you that our art has always been powerful and has always had the ability to move, not just Black people, but nations and the world towards our aesthetic.
What's interesting about that, I was thinking about how, the messages in the music, you have certain key periods of time in African American history where the music is basically the soundtrack of our experience here in America. And now we're here in such a critical time, in the global history, but as it pertains to our community, certainly a very critical time. We're seeing just blatant, expressions of oppression and racism. However, I don't hear the music that is inspiring us to overcome. In my days, the 60s, we had a lot of 60s and 70s, we had a lot of music that was the soundtrack of the civil rights movement. And this time that we're discussing the Harlem Renaissance, I know there was music that was meaningful to what the people, Billie Holiday's Strange Fruit, talking about the lynchings that were going on. But now when I hear my young brothers and sisters coming down the street with their boombox, their Bluetooth, I'm hearing straight pornography. What can we do to inspire the creativity of young people to support the civil rights.
All right. So I'm gonna have to. I understand your premise, but I'll have to disagree with you for a second.
Okay.
All right.
Go ahead. Give it to me.
Just be. So, in my generation, I mean, we're in the same generation. I was born in the '60s, right? I grew up in the '70s. Hip hop is our child, right? Run DMC, all the rest of the stuff. So we tend to at times really give young people a bad rap, and I mean that. I think that we always glamorize our own time period as if we didn't have DJ Quick and Too Short and all kinds of other people, Blowfly. You know, my mother's generation, they had Rudy Ray Moore. My grandparents' generation, they had Red Fox, right? So we've always had a vast continuum of expression. And even in all of those time periods like today, so my kids are 20 and 19, and they're both in the arts. Anytime I make one of those kind of, statements, they start pulling up all kinds of people and showing me, right? Educating me, whether it's Kendrick, whether it's J. Cole, whether it's Nipsey when he was putting out his music and telling people about a different way to conceptualize, where we live. And in his case, specifically South Central, right? Specifically South Central, and talking about owning the block, right? And then talking about fighting against gentrification by owning the block, and then creating a space where people come to visit, like the Harlem Renaissance, to experience your art. So I really think that and I think we all do this. I don't care who it is. My mother's generation is going to always say that theirs was so conscious and so whatever. And, it was the middle of the civil rights movement. They were singing Baby Love, right? You know what I mean? So I can't go there, because I work with young people every day, and I see, of course there's expressions of art that make us cringe. You know what I mean? But Too Short's cuss words, just let them roll. MFSGD hole. You know what I mean? Made some people cringe too. You know what I mean? And he's an icon of my generation, right? So I just think that we need to listen more, and I don't mean just listen to the music, but I mean listen when your kids, when your grandkids, when your nieces and nephews are saying, listen to this, and not just blocking it out, because they have a continuum, just like we had a continuum. And they got stuff that is so politically charged and politically conscious. And they got stuff that's just about partying, right? Because in the midst of everything we've gone through as people of African descent, we've always found a way to live, laugh, and love. We've always found a way to, as Langston Hughes and the Harlem Renaissance talked about, swallowing all this pain and coming through it with a smile, right? So I don't disparage somebody who, in the midst of all this, is making me smile. And at the same time, I have to listen enough to these beautiful young people who are asking us in our generation to simply listen, right? And not critique in the most negative way that we do at times. Not you, because I know you got this big global view of things. But I mean, just like the work you do with Afro beats, right? I mean, in our generation, we were not connected to Africa in any way in that shape, all right? I didn't know, when I was 18, 19, I couldn't have told you what an African dance was, right? I mean, popular dance, not traditional dance with the drums, but a popular dance. I couldn't have told you what African style was, right? I couldn't have told you, but because of social media, YouTube, all the rest of the stuff, we've truly become a global community, and it's our young people who are infinitely more connected to the diaspora. You see them dancing, from our motherland, you know what I mean? And exposing us to stuff. So I think there is a narrative out there that is politically charged, politically conscious, pushing people to do it. And once again, we need look no further than Nipsey Hussle right there in South Central, where the legacy of that brother putting it down about consciousness, transformation, redemption, And when you looked at that funeral, that shows you that if that didn't matter to young people, they wouldn't have shown up the way they did. They were still responding to that message of getting your stuff together, moving forward, and uplifting the community. So I respectfully, disagree.
So, I do get it. And you know what, I do pride myself about having, a special, the moniker I always use is Uncle Greg. So I always, I am not afraid of asking the young people, okay, what are you really saying in that piece of
Yes,
music?
yes.
And you know what? I had a front row seat to the explosion of hip hop. And I got to tell you something. I respect Too Short, but we knew Too Short was coming from the Pimp Game. Okay,
Yes.
we knew that. We knew that NWA was coming from the gangster culture,
Yes.
and we knew that those records. Yes, but they had a place. Okay, you know what I'm saying. So, but now what I hear is I want to hear more of the Nipsey Hustles if I'm listening to that music. I want to hear more socially redeeming through the expression of hip hop culture. And having watched hip hop grow and mature and become what it is today, I got to tell you something. I'm listening to the music. I'm hearing lyrics that do make me more than cringe. I have to say that and so I begin to wonder, okay, the revolution, we need a cultural revolution. And as you
Yes.
know, Dr. Walker, none of the revolutions in America or across the world uh, in the movement really hit the ground running until the young people,
Yeah.
got up and got involved. If you look at Dr. King's movement, it wasn't until the youth departments of the churches started hitting the streets alongside of them. If you look over in South Africa, it wasn't until the youth came out and started protesting against, Afrikaans being the language that they had to learn about. It wasn't until the youth stood up and spoke. And we're in a situation now where I would love to see more. I mean, it's just me. I'm an old guy. I'm just speaking as Uncle Greg. I'm saying it's up to my young people now to kind of temper that music that we're hearing, that cultural expression that we're hearing, to something that's more socially redeeming. And that's all I got to say.
Yeah, and listen, I'm not saying that there aren't things that are troubling, okay? But I just think that they're doing, of course, there's just like we talked about, everybody has their lane. Like Too Short had his lane, NWA had their lane, and Public Enemy had their lane, and then Kid and Play had their lane, right?
Yes,
so
yes.
It's that continuum, and I just think that sometimes I just remember when we were growing up and we started listening to hip hop, and I remember what my parents thought about any hip hop, right? You know what I mean? First, they thought it was bastardizing all music because it was sampling, right? The whole thing was always, they done messed that song up, right?
Right.
That's James Brown, Funky Drummer. What they doing that to it, right? Oh my God, what did they do to Knee Deep? What did they do to? And it was like, oh, the world is the world is coming to an end. And then, once again, LA, when Snoop, The Chronic, NWA, Ice-T, and then it was like, oh my God, we are the worst things ever, right? I mean, ever. But look at the evolution of those individuals, right? When we see Dr. Dre as a billionaire and a person who's not just a cultural entrepreneur, but a business entrepreneur, talking about beats, music, and a person who was able to get all the criticism. I mean, you remember how people were about NWA, even the name, right?
Yep,
right.
Yep.
It was, and then to watch the person evolve into then Death Row, and we're like, oh my God, and then being able to be confident enough to leave that, his masters and everything there, because he bet on himself and the fact that he knew he was talented and he could continue to move on and build something else. So now his personal wealth is worth more than what Death Row was, right? But evolving. Look at Ice Cube, right? And then evolving. I mean, being as politically conscious, but, don't F with a girl from the projects, right? You know what I mean? America's Most Wanted. Then being politically conscious, but a diss song, No Vaseline, where you're like, you know what I mean? He's going in. And then you watch, once again, an individual evolving. And you watch him do, whether it's Are We There Yet? Or, you're like, Ice Cube is in a movie about, how does this work? So I give these young people an opportunity to evolve and move to and believe in that human spirit, and have watched it happen with some Ice-T, 6 a.m, right? I mean, and for many people, that is really the beginnings of West Coast gangster music, is 6 a.m, police at my door, right?
Yes.
And then you see this brother evolving. And then you realize when you watch some of these shows that he's on, Like he's never taken a drink. You know what I mean? You know, he's never smoked weed. He's never taken a drink. He and his wife, when they were away for one day, it was the first time in 13 years they'd ever been away. I mean, what I'm saying is, I just think that people are multifaceted, and that, you know, having seen history in my own generation and watched people evolve and be counter narratives in their own life, don't worry. I think we're gonna be okay. I think we're gonna be
All
okay.
right. Well, you know what? That's all good. That's really, really good. I love my young people. And you know what? Even as we over here are building out Beach City Radio, I mean, that is really the underlying theme of what we want to do is, and that is you know, build a new paradigm of broadcasting in this, you know, with all of the available technology, but bring in the young people so that they can, you know, have at it and become the new voice of America, you know. And so that's what we would like to do here right this minute. You know, we're trying to. I see you all coming through here. I'm trying to log in your questions and your comments that are here. They're not quite coming through in the way that we'd like them to do, but that's okay. We're doing a new thing here. The available technology. It's a beautiful thing to have with you. You guys are with us. This is Dr. Daniel Walker. He's a brainiac. That's always just gonna put it like that. This is one of my favorite cats right here. You know, we love to have these conversations with him. And we were just talking about hip hop. Now, you know what? If I can, just a moment, you guys, just bear with me here. I want to play a little trailer because we're talking about hip hop right now and the evolution of music and how our opinions on, you know, what the young people are listening to. But, you know, let's talk about gospel. You're an expert in gospel music. And for me, I've been a part of some major gospel, you know, radio programs and promotions across my time in this industry. And, you know, we have watched gospel music just change quite a bit. I would venture to say, this is me again, and maybe just as an old Uncle Greg talking some stuff, but I think gospel music is at a identity crisis right now. But you know, while we can talk about that a little bit, I think it is important that you what you're doing in terms of examining the history of gospel music. And I want to just play a trailer for the people here of a project that you produced and directed and is now available to see on PBS. And if I could just bring that up here for 1 second, I think I'll be able to play it. Hold on 1 minute. Uh-oh, I cannot. Hold on, guys.
Well,
while I get that together there, Dr. Daniel, talk a little bit about How Sweet the Sound, the history of gospel music in Los Angeles.
So the episode you're about to bring up is an episode of the PBS series Artbound, and it's about this interesting time period. And I want to kind of tie it to something else. An exhibit that I did at the California African-American Museum of the same name and title, How Sweet the Sound, Gospel in Los Angeles. And both of these were really trying to look at, one, how gospel comes into Los Angeles. And then number two, this really critical period in history, from the end of the Watts riots to the election of Tom Bradley and the recording of Aretha Franklin's Amazing Grace album, which is still, as you know, still the highest selling gospel album of all time. And interestingly, still the biggest selling album of Aretha Franklin's career, which is crazy when you think about the Queen of Soul and that record is still it. But I would say crazy, but at the same time, I would say it's natural that it should be, because she is literally not only Queen of Soul, but easily one of the greatest gospel singers ever, right? So it makes sense to me that her album would also be the top gospel album ever. It was about trying to look at how churches and how music is able to come from a crazy period. Oh my God, it's so relevant when we're talking about just right now. You know what I mean? Like, how do you come out of a devastating social, political, economic experience shining? All right?
Right.
Shining. And so the context is the Watts riots in 1960, and you gotta be thinking, this is crazy. You know what I mean? The city is on fire, Los Angeles, and yet within 7 years, that same city elects the first African American as the mayor of the city. Think about backlash of people to us because of things, right? I don't even want to go into the whole, the memes that you see right now and the comparisons on social media between the whole issue of how people are viewing Colin Kaepernick's, protests a few years ago, and how somehow the double standard is that that other individuals can sit there, bring a gun up to the state capitol, defy all the laws, and not even get any kind of anything, right? So, but the notion of what we do and how we come through. So I know you got the trailer queued up. Go ahead and roll with that if you want to, and then we can come back to it.
All right, let's check it out.
Bam.
Well, there you have it. That was pretty neat, huh? Oh, well.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? That was a really powerful, I guess it's more than just the documentary. It was, the piece you had down at the California African American Museum. It's really interesting that for me, I hadn't known about the exhibit for whatever reason, and I happened to be at CAM for a meeting, and I saw it. I was like, wow! And so I was able to walk around and really see it, and excellent job there to examine it. Now, how long did it take you to come up with all of that history? A lot of the stuff is spoken word history, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess I want to say like 17, 18 years ago. So I've always been, I'm not a PK, I'm not a preacher's kid, but I grew up in church. You know what I mean? I was always in church, and I grew up AME, and I grew up in a little place, Fontana, California, and went to shout out to Bethel AME Church on 16262 Baseline Boulevard in Fontana, California, and the music always affected me. You know what I mean? It always affected me, and I remember. The Love Alive series, Walter Hawkins, the Love Alive whole series, we sang those songs, man. And I thought our music director had made them. I didn't know that, it was like something else. I just didn't understand anything like that. But I started realizing that music is like in my DNA. I'm not a singer. They say those who can't teach, and maybe that's why I do what I do. But about 17, 18 years ago, I had this idea that I wanted to try to, so as a scholar, there's 3 forms of music created in the turn of the century, meaning the 1800s to the 1900s. And those 3 forms are gospel, blues, and jazz. And the reality is, as you may know, you can get a PhD in jazz at just about any music school that offers a PhD in the world. Not in America, in the world. The 2 forms that most music schools teach are classical and jazz, right? So there's a plethora of opportunities and also the study of it. There are more books written about Miles Davis, one person, than all the books written about the entire genre of gospel music combined. All right? Blues, because of the fascination that white British youth had with black blues players in the 40s and 50s, which then leads to the Rolling Stones, Cream, the Beatles, all the rest of the stuff. Because of that, there's a huge desire to study and understand the blues. But gospel, which is the only one that is still being organically created on a mass scale now, meaning I can't go down the street. If you tell me, find a place where somebody's playing the blues tonight, I got to go on my phone. I got to search blues. I got to go, and it's probably going to be in Westwood or something like that, right?
Yes,
where I'm going to find that. If I say jazz, it's going to be about the same thing. I'm going to have to go figure out. But if I say gospel, give me a Saturday or a Sunday. If it's a Saturday, I can go into any Seventh-day Adventist church and hear people getting down. And if it's Sunday, I can go up and down Crenshaw, Vermont, any street, and I'm talking America, wherever, and I'm going to see that music organically created. So I figured out, I said, look, why is there a dearth? Why is the one form that's still alive, the one that's least studied, right? Because I told you there are less books about, and it's not even, it's criminal. It's not even close. So I initially wanted to write a book about this early gospel performer named Arizona Drains. And Arizona Drains was the chief musician for the Church of God in Christ. So a little shout out and a connection to Maddie Moss Clark, the whole Clark sisters thing on Lifetime. So Arizona Drains was the chief pianist and musician for the Church of God in Christ. Her understudy was then Maddie Moss Clark. You got old school pictures of her playing and Maddie. So just to tie it all into today. So I was just like, I wanted to write this book, but I started realizing there were no sources. And sources, what that means is, for a historian, we don't deal in conjecture. We don't deal in just people talking. We got to have something that ties to something else, a thing, a piece of paper, a document. And so I went down to Memphis to try to find Church of God in Christ, you know, anything that was an archival material to use for this book. And there were none. And what I mean by that is, it doesn't mean they don't exist, but they weren't where I thought they would be. And so I began a thing called the Gospel Music History Project. The Gospel Music History Project is an international effort to try to place the study of gospel on the same level as blues and jazz. Went about creating and connecting different museums and archives to people. And then at USC, we ended up getting a grant. We created the Gospel Music History Archive. If you Google that, anyone, you can go and see all kinds of stuff. Now, it's not the full everything yet, but it's a lot of stuff on there. And then we got a grant to study the, to archive the history of Pentecostalism in America. And I made an argument to SC, Center for Religion and Civic Culture, shout out to everybody there, right. To concentrate it on the Church of God in Christ, because it is the largest Pentecostal denomination in America, the largest African-American, and it's the one that didn't have archival stuff done. And so for 3 years, I toured around the United States and the world, finding people who had collections of gospel or things related to the Church of God in Christ. The other interesting thing was we were able to bring about 6 or 7 of those people to Los Angeles, to USC, and to train them in digitization, how to archive, organizing their stuff, gave them grants, all that stuff. So Emma Clark, shout out in the Bay, got my person back at the Center for Black Church Studies in Dallas, Texas, Ladrian in Kansas City, forget her name, in Gainesville, Florida, and put all that together. And then after doing all that, I started saying, I want to record it visually too, like photography. So Matt Gaynor, man, this dude, we started boom, 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 you know, bringing the camera everywhere. And then I started just saying, let's start filming it. And the first one, oh my God, it's on the archive. Oh, we were bad. Oh, it looked like trash. And then we just started upping our game, cameras, lights, all stuff, and taking it more serious, because I wanted to make everything kind of documentary quality. So honestly, the museum exhibit and the television show are the culmination of about 2 decades of putting in work. You know what I mean? And then trying to move it to the next level. You guys, I mean, you know, my next project is this this series about gospel music, but specifically, is there anybody out there at the studio or whatever else, not just about gospel music, but the tie between gospel music and popular music. In essence, I argue that gospel music is the foundation, the seed of not just soul, not just R&B, not just that, but all kinds of rock and roll, rock, you name it, where you see all these other people channeling the ethos of these pioneers in gospel music. So it's I guess the message anybody is put in work. You know what I mean? You know, put in work. Put in work. I remember this group ATL, Hip Hop Again. You say, or what's the song about nobody who ain't never paid dues, right? You know, I think it was ATL, but paying dues. So you see the culmination, but understand that there's 2 decades worth of work. And now God has just saw fit to be like in this season to let it flower, because I'm prepared to be able to even engage and ask questions and work it through. You get me?
Yes, yes,
So,
yes.
so,
Yeah,
so,
you know, it's interesting you say that because about the music being the foundation of of all the popular music, and when you think about Sister Rosetta Tharpe, and when you think
yes,
about Bessie Smith, you think about even Ray Charles. When their music first hit, the criticism that they had was that it sounded too much like church music.
yes, yes.
Wow.
But you know what, Art? Yeah. I mean, that's where the comeback is. Yeah, you can grow up in something, right? I always tell people music is so beautiful because you can't resist it, right? If you're in its presence, it gets into you. And it's not just an auditory, it's not just a thing you hear, but you feel it in your body, right? And so those beats, those cadences, those interactions, I would say to people, the place where young people, getting back to our whole issue of like young people, the place where our young people experience live music, meaning instrumentation, experimentation, and improvisation today, the only place that happens is in the church. Where
Yes,
else are
that's
you
right.
going to hear live 4 or 5 instruments, rhythm section, all the stuff, interaction, crowd, everything else, learning the techniques of how to be in front of a mic, all that stuff, that is still the breeding ground. So you can't think that once somebody hits the big time, Whitney Houston, once somebody hits the big time, Mary J. Blige, once somebody hits the big time, her, once somebody hits the big time, SZA, once somebody hits the big time, that stuff is still in them. And the
Right.
chords that resonate the most are those chords that have resonated throughout their lifetime. So, that's where we are.
And that goes back through generations of our music. And we were at a talk that the famous Bootsy Collins was giving a talk over in Englewood, right? And so the question was asked of him, how did the church influence his playing? And he was like, that was the foundation. The church. The funk came
The
out of the
funk,
church,
the
right?
funk, the funk. Wait, real quick. Let me just throw something at you. The funk, right? So the biggest thing about the funk is the one. You know where I'm coming from, Greg. It's
Yeah,
that it's
yes,
on the one, right?
yes,
So the traditional Western music is on the twos and fours. That's
yes,
traditional African. Man, getting back to the whole Afro beats, everything else.
yes,
The
brother.
traditional African music is on the one.
Right.
So we go 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's
Yes.
on the one. But we, traditional Western, we were here and everything else, we still had that. And then there comes a revolution in the music, and that was the birth
Right.
of Pentecostalism, the Church of God in Christ. And they were on the one. And then guess who? James Brown went to Africa and came back on the one. And
Right.
George Clinton talks about the one thing he learned more than anything from James Brown was on the one, right?
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
And then think about we just talked about hip hop. The foundational music of hip hop in its first iteration was James Brown and Parliament Funkadelic, which are all on the one.
The one.
Right?
That's right. That's right. It's
So,
interesting because in that same conversation with Bootsy Collins, he also mentioned that Fela Kuti and Afrobeats was also his influence, and Fela Kuti also mentions James Brown as one of his influences as well. So you're right. It all comes back to the motherland.
it all
Yes, brother.
comes back. And so sometimes, we don't even know what we're doing, right?
Right.
We don't
right.
know. That's why you don't. Think about this. You know, growing up, man, when you hear Parliament Funkadelic, you're like, it's different. Remember? I mean, it's
Right.
different. There's other people. There's the Daz Band was a funk band. Of course, Rick James was the funk band, right? You got the Ohio Players, they're a funk band. But there was always something different about Parliament Funkadelic, right? And you think it's the imagery and you think it's this, but it's the one.
The one.
It's the one.
Yes.
It makes your soul do something that other stuff doesn't do, Going back to, and all those foundational pieces, the one thing that when we came over here and they placed us in these terrible circumstances, one thing we still had was God and culture. And as we had God and culture, there was nobody literally negotiating or telling us how to construct music. You know, we weren't even doing our music in their churches. All right.
Mm-hmm.
We were out in, as they call the brush arbors and stuff like that, making this music and keeping those beats alive. Now, of course, we're multifaceted, so we can be 2s and 4s, we can be 3/4 beats, we can do all these things, we can move through. But the foundational thing that connects all this, us and Jamaica, us and Cuba, us and Haiti, is the one. It's the one.
Yeah. You know, this is really, really incredible. Let me ask you a question. You ever been in church and then the band is really killing and it's a praise break? Don't you hear licks like from Just Knee Deep sometimes hidden under those covers?
Well, you know, because the musicians are playing at a jazz club and playing an R&B band on Friday and Saturday. So
right?
Be real about that one first.
Yes. Oh, that's funny. I'll be in church, man, and then I said, no, they didn't.
You know, and the old person up there like, what? You're like,
right?
What's that? You're like, just stop. You know,
I've gone to the musicians and asked them, and they said, "Oh, you heard that?" I said, "Yes, I did."
Trying to put one over on somebody up there like, oh yeah.
Hilarious.
Oh my God. Oh. Man, I was in church one time. You know, there's this old Pentecostal song. He goes, we don't need no matches. You know, we got fire by itself, like it's fire by itself. You know,
right.
No matches, fire by itself. You know.
Wow.
And then this church choir or the rhythm section then went and fused that with fire, the Ohio Players fire, right? You know what I mean? And everybody's in there, and then, you know, and it's this traditional old school hardcore holiness song, and then flipped it over there. But I would argue that if you talk to the Ohio Players, they would have probably told you, well, I got that from.
Right.
You know? Yes. You know, you just don't know. So, man, remember when we were kids? Well, when I was growing up, I was in college. This group came out of the Bay Area. All right, 3 dudes, all Tonys. You remember Tony, right?
Yes.
Tony, right? Wiggins and Sadiq and all that. They came together, and they had this song. Hey, little water. Hey, little, which was nothing but way.
That's right.
In the water. Way.
Man.
And we were grooving, and we'd be like, man, that is so infectious. Why?
Right.
Because I done grown up on so many baptisms. And so many times I've heard somebody singing Wade in the Water, that then when they channeled that with just, hey, little Walter, I'm sitting up there grooving, right?
Right.
So
man,
I'm just, you know, this is, you know, in the series that I'm pushing right now, trying to get this contract with these studios, with these networks. That's the essence of it. It's that you can take something so current and then see what the antecedents are, and then go back and forth, because it's a balancing act that we have between the sacred and the profane, between life and that's who we are.
Yes.
Right? And so it's only natural. I mean, it's getting back to our first conversation about young people and about music and about, you know, it's we are in a continuum. We are continually evolving and moving, but we continually Sankofa looking forward, but then pulling something from the past and bringing it with us, right? Not forgetting where we came from. And in many cases, that's a beat, that's a cadence, that's an experience that we had that changed us dramatically. And now what do we want to do? We want to share that experience with somebody else. We want somebody else to have that transformative experience, that redemptive, that resurrection, right?
Yes,
and when I mean by resurrection, I mean that rebirth that we want people to be able to have, right? And I don't care if it's Marvin Gaye. Look at all that church.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
I don't care if it's Diana Ross. If you don't know about her in church, you need to understand.
Right.
You know, it's that resurrection that we hope that we can not just resurrect ourselves, not just resurrect our people, but guess what? in the history of us being here, resurrect America.
Right. Yes, brother. Yes, yes.
You know?
That's what I'm talking about. Cultural revolution is what we need. And you know
Man.
what? You're saying it perfectly. A resurrection, of our souls, because they're trying to kill us out here. And, mind, body, and spirit. And, through the music, that can be that resurrecting power.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes, yes,
Mhm.
yes. Man. Woo. Yes.
Ah!
What else you got up there, Greg? What else you got?
Look, oh man, let's keep on going with this one here, and man, it's really, really great. Now, let me just ask you I want to go back to the Harlem Renaissance piece
Yes,
because I
yes.
was really fascinated. I just really loved that period of time, and you know, what about the literary resurrection?
Mhm.
So now we're in this, if we can contrast that time with what's happening now, cultural revolution, right? So not only in the music, but you have literary, but literary is not only just books, but in this new media platform,
Yeah.
in this new dynamic where there's so many places where a listener, a reader, a consumer of media can get their information. So there's this discussion happening about this show on, I can't, is that one on Netflix or
On
HBO,
that.
whatever? Black is,
Yeah.
Black is,
Black AF.
yeah. So, and then you have, our sister with Insecure, and all of these different voices happening now because they have the opportunity and so many access points now. What do you see happening in terms of cultural revolution through those media expressions?
Well, one, I think when you look at, and I'll concentrate like Issa Rae, right? I mean, it's a counter narrative, right? Like we have been fed that there's a certain narrative of blackness, right?
Mm,
And I don't care if it's in the 20s, the 50s, even today, this narrative. And then here you get a person saying,
right.
I'm not like the narrative, but I'm, there are lots of us who are not like the narrative that people have put out there. That's why Insecure resonates with people, not because they look at it and say, oh, that's something that's never occurred. They go, that looks like me. That looks like
Right.
my girlfriends. That looks like the people I hang out with. That looks like my neighborhood in Inglewood, because it is your neighborhood. Why
Right.
it feels like me, right? And I think the other thing that's been going on, and I'm blessed. So my daughter is a film studies major at Syracuse. And, sometimes the great thing about this COVID piece has been that my kids are both back. And my son is a media management major at University of Miami. And watching them navigate through their classes and seeing what type of narrative and what type of dialogue they're seeking to have, right? And then talking about like she's finishing this paper about about Black Hollywood, and specifically it's a class about Hollywood, but her take is, well, I want to talk about Black Hollywood, right? And one of the points of her final paper is that for Black people, Hollywood is so different because it's not just glitz and glamour, but it has also been this thing that has perpetuated and created some of the most heinous and negative stereotypes of us, right? So that when we enter Hollywood, there's not just a question of, do I want to be famous? But the question is, do I want to buy into those narratives and then perpetuate those narratives, right? So my daughter, who's 21, though, is situating it on, talk about connections to Hollywood Shuffle, Robert Townsend's film, right? You know what I mean? I'm just saying about these young people are doing a lot more things than we think they're doing, right? But the notion is that now we have a lot more opportunities because of Netflix, because of Hulu, because of streaming, because of all these things, to see a more nuanced version of us. And so when we find one that we don't like, we can just turn it off and turn to another one. Whereas, when we were growing up, all you got was George Jefferson, right, and Good Times and Sanford and Son. And there was no other. And if you wanted to see yourself on the screen, then you watched. Even if some of those characters may have been really, really troubling when you look at the big picture down the line, right? But it's all we had. So now I love that there can be things that we say, we don't have to essentialize Blackness, and somebody can say, that's a show and other people like it, but I just don't. And I can move to something else and it's okay because I can choose the other version of something, right? Or because the platforms have become not fully, as you know, because they're still gatekeepers, right? I mean, me trying to get this show on is about gatekeepers standing in the way, right? Not understanding the Black experience. And then literally, man, and this gospel thing, these cats, I've been in studios and they've told me, well, we just don't see an audience for anything about gospel.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And then you watch Lifetime doing the Clark sisters, and then they see, and then you go, everybody knows who Dorinda and these people are, right? Twinkie and all the sisters and everything else. So the notion is that we have these multiple platforms now. It's not where we need to be at all. We're still so far behind the number in terms of not just our percentages, but when you go to any set, I don't care how Black it looks on the camera, behind the camera is a whole nother thing. And the studio execs making the decisions about what is and what isn't don't look like us in most cases. In most cases, right? Yes. So I think that it's a renaissance right now that we're having in television and media because Issa Rae was able to put it out first and get an audience and then say to somebody, this is relevant. Look what I did. So I just think that it's a good time because we're being, I hope we can choose to not watch if something we don't like because we have thousands of channels. And I just hope that at the same time, we don't have to kill somebody when we don't like the representation. You know what I mean? Because sometimes before a movie even comes out, Black Twitter has killed the actors and the actresses and created this narrative so that people don't go watch the movie because of some issue or some upset. I'm gonna break it down. Here we go, because we can go and you can talk about Underground Railroad if you want. Harriet Tubman.
Yes.
And we killed the choice of Cynthia Erivo as Harriet because she wasn't Black. Now, none of us that are alive today was enslaved, right? So it ain't like we know that narrative either. And then we forget that people in Britain were colonized, right? And we forget that those Black people are the same Nigerian, Ghanaian Black people that we are, right? Right? And I just want people to always remember, actors are just that, actors. The great thing about being an actor is that you take on another role that's not yourself. Right. And that's why you're considered a great actor, because you're not just being yourself, but you've taken on a role. How can somebody play a knight from the medieval times if they were never there? Because they're an actor. You know what I mean? So we kill, and then it dampens the enthusiasm for the film before we ever saw it, because we had some ancillary conversation before it even happened that then pushed down the numbers for everybody else, and then have people say, well, no, this can't be. And yet, we were upset because she was British, but here goes our stupid double standard. But if it would have been Idris Elba,
but see, people think Idris Elba.
We ain't got one problem.
But you know what? Sometimes you rarely see my brother with his British accent, because I'm thinking Stringer Bell and Stringer Bell, right?
Exactly. I didn't know he was British for 10 years.
Right? I was like, what the heck?
Why can't they do this? Why can't they? If they said Idris Elba was playing Martin Luther King, we'd be like, yep.
Right.
Yep. Frederick Douglass. Yep. All right. We'd be lining up. So this false upset. But that's what I say. So our mediums is great that we have stuff, but I just wish, my people, that we don't kill scripts before they come out, that we don't kill actors before they get a chance to shine, that we don't kill the project before it even gets distributed. You see what I mean? Because the person who made those films had to try to convince a studio that there was an audience. And then when we go before the thing ever comes out and kill it, I have to deal with all this.
I had a very profound conversation one time with Bishop Blake, and the thing he kept saying in this dialogue was, we have to begin to think global. We've got to be global. And so I think it's really crazy when we look at, Cynthia Erivo, I'm about to call him Stringer Bell, Idris Elba, and we say, okay, they're not black. No, they are. And you know what I'm saying? And we have to embrace the global context of our people. I don't care where they from, doggone it. If they got some melanin, that's what's up. You know that's the truth.
I always want to tell people, it's just a flip of the coin where
Yeah.
you ended up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Like somebody got dropped off in Brazil, black.
Yeah.
Somebody got dropped off in Colombia, black. Somebody got dropped off in Veracruz, Mexico, black. Somebody got dropped off in Florida, black. Somebody got dropped off in Haiti, black. Somebody got dropped off in Jamaica, black. Somebody got then imported back into England, black. Somebody got colonized and brought to black. Stop
Man, we met a brother. Man, we met a brother last fall who was from the Ukraine.
Say.
And when he said that, I was like, what?
And here goes somebody, really... he ain't real black because he's from the Ukraine. Everybody like, I've been more black than all y'all. He's like, every day I know I'm black.
Right. Man, that's really, really something.
So, that's one of my biggest things. We cannot, essentialize blackness. Like black is not one thing, right? It is not 10 things. It's thousands of things. Right?
Yes.
And we, this notion of judging and like I say, killing our creativity. You know how hard it is to make it in this industry of film and television.
Yes.
It is so hard for somebody of color to get in. You might think, oh, I see all these people. It's crazy to be able to get in. And so for the few that squeak through, we got to be supportive. We got to be encouraging, and we got to watch. If you don't like it, sometimes you just need to turn your TV on and let it show that it's being watched. Right. Just so we can get that right. I'm just being real. You know
that's right.
You may need to set your stuff. You sleep and just put some stuff on just so people see us watching these things. Because even with the Renaissance we have going on today, it is still paltry. There's a study that comes out every year from UCLA, Darnell Hunt and the Center there at Africana Studies, that talks about the issue of representation of people of color in Hollywood. And it comes out every single year and talks about, directors, showrunners, lead characters, all the rest of these things. And every year it's called the Hollywood Report Card, the Equity or Diversity Report Card. And every year, even though we think all this is happening, you don't know how much content is being created. Think about all the stuff on Netflix and Hulu and all these streaming services. And so even if you have 10 black shows, that's only 10 out of literally 1,000. But you think because you see more than we saw when we were growing up, that it must be all this stuff. But it's all relative to the total number of things being created. So this is why we can lead it. Why I created the Long Beach Indie Film Festival. You know what I mean? That's why it's not a shameless plug, but I'm concerned about narratives. I'm concerned about storytelling. Why? Because stories either uplift or they denigrate. All right. And the most powerful medium for telling stories in the history of mankind has been this thing we call television, film, and now this social media thing. And so we have to be concerned about how we create narratives. So I created the Long Beach Indie International Film Festival, not just as a thing to showcase, because it does showcase diverse creators from all around the world. But the second two premises of it are, one, to be able to create a dialogue between scholars and the industry about narratives of people of color, about women, about LGBT communities, to be critical about it, all right? And then the third part is to try to be a bridge for all of these beautiful, creative young people who want to go into that industry but don't know how to navigate that interesting network of familiar connections. And when I say familiar connections, you know what I'm talking about here, Greg. Hollywood is not like other jobs where you put in a resume and there's an HR department and then they go through and pick it. Now, that's good for the janitor at Warner Brothers. That's good for but everybody on the creative side, that's all about connections to people. Somebody said, I worked with this person on the last project. I'm bringing them in on that project. And so for our people, young, African-American, low income, Latino, trying to get in that without any history of those connections, because my mother and my father wasn't in there, trying to make that happen. So we literally have at the Long Beach Convention Center workshops over and over again, teaching people how to, one, connect with these folk. And I love my community of artists and creatives who give their time to make sure they can transfer that knowledge to somebody else. And then not only transfer, but so many of them have then taken young people under their wings and gotten them opportunities. Shout out to Jordan Tyner, who's one of my former interns at AFI now. Okay. And for anybody who's out there listening, AFI is American Film Institute. That is the most, SC is the most prestigious, but the most selective of all film schools is AFI. They only let in about 20 people a year. All right. And Jordan came from Ohio, came out here to work, was an assistant to people, all the rest of stuff, put it in his work, started working for me and some other people, and then as at AFI right now doing work, right? But that's a huge undertaking to even know those names and those initials, right? So whenever we do get in those positions, you have got to be about supporting the people as much as you can as they go through that, because the minute one of those shows don't work, many times we as the creatives don't get the second chance.
You know, a shout out to Lila Mays, who's on here watching us today. You know, she's over that Directors Guild Producers Training Program. And, you know, we were having a conversation one time. And she said, Greg, you know, I'm doing all these seminars. There's all this rich resources, but I don't see us. So we joined together with Lila, and we were out at Cal State Long Beach. Rhonda and I, we created a forum for her to present this program to young filmmakers coming through the Cal State Long Beach. There were up to 50, 60 kids in there, man. It was great, you know, and it's just great to link up with people who want to pour back into, you know, reach back to the generation and say, hey, this is the information that you need to advance in this creative culture.
Yeah, I'm glad you said Lila, because I saw Lila had a comment on there. Lila, that's my girl from way back. That's San Diego State. That's you don't want to start with San Diego State, but that's from way back. And literally,
I can do it. I know a little bit about it.
Yes, but us talking about the Producers Guild, Directors Guild Fellowship Program, and literally lining it up with Long Beach Indie so we can be able to let people know about that program, right? I mean, those types of things are how we as this creative community can continue to share, continue to uplift and enlighten, continue to open doors for, continue to try to make opportunities happen for folk. Because we may not have all of the kind of friendship and familial connections, but we do have them. And it's about, shout out to P. Frank Williams. You know Frank Williams. You know, I was at a party at his building right around Christmas time, and he was just coalescing all of these people who were behind the camera folk. And it was maybe 100 of us in the room just sharing. I'm a lighting person. I'm a cinematographer. I'm a showrunner. I'm an editor. I'm a grip. All these other dynamic positions that actually pay good in the industry, but literally we're just working folk, you know, just working folk. Shout out to Billy Johnson, our other mutual great friend, right? Who once again, going back to the Inland Empire and the Black Voice News and Cheryl Brown and Paulette Brown and Regina Wilson and all this of literally taking people like myself, like Billy Johnson, and giving us opportunities to experience this thing called communications and media, and then us taking the next step at different times. Billy much sooner than me a little bit later, but us taking the time and then using these familial connections, these friendship connections to open up doors for one another. Okay. Mm-hmm. So it's I see Lila talking about we got to be intentional about these things, right? That it's not just I'm doing it because I'm doing it. I'm being very intentional, not only about the information, but I'm gonna throw the other piece about mentoring.
Yes.
Because as you know, Greg, the hardest thing is getting on a set, is getting in a studio, it's getting in one of these things. And I'm gonna use the word not knowing how to act. And what I mean, not knowing that. So these are my 3 things I give to all young people. They're my 3 rules of how you're gonna make it in the entertainment industry. Number 1, show up. Show up. There's so many divas, you know, in this industry that people just don't show up. And some, because they think it's too big for it, they get the casting call, but they don't want, the people don't show up. And why do you want to show up? Because you never know what's going to happen. You know, on any set, you got to, so that's the next thing, be a sponge. You know, somebody brought you in as a PA and a lighting dude didn't show up and somebody else shows you how to do that lighting thing. You got somebody else over here running sound. You just watching them do it. You got somebody over here in Adobe watching it. Be a sponge. Soak up every single bit of it. Because, as you know, those jack of all trades who can basically either they can be the cinematographer or they can bring everything out. I watch you and Rhonda do your thing, right? And
Yes.
sometimes you can have a big crew and other times you like it's me and you and whatever's in the trunk, right? But the post-production ends up making it look like there was something. And then the last thing, be a good person, you know? Because when you're working in these small, confined spaces, the last thing anybody wants is somebody with an attitude, right? Because you're working these long hours and you don't need to be the person talking about, oh, I only signed up for 8 hours. You know, in our industry, that don't mean anything.
Right.
8 hours. And it's on the 12th hour. And you got to be a good person. And why a good person? Because the next shoot, somebody's going to bring you in because of how helpful you were on that last one and say, I love your spirit. You bring something to the table. And now you were just, you know, kind of improvising on lights, but now you're doing the lights, you know, and next you're doing the next thing. And the next thing you're doing the next thing. So these are, you know, there's my three. They seem simple rules, but if you just show up, soak in everything and be a good person, you're going to start moving forward in that industry. And if you miss any one of those, you might as well hang it up.
Right.
Show up on time.
Well, listen,
and be a butthole. It's over.
That's right. Hey, look, before we go get out of here, this is everybody. Thank you guys so much. This is Coffee Conversations with Greg J. We've got Dr. Daniel Walker. We're just in here chopping it up about all things culture. We want to tell our own stories and everything. But before we get out of here, and we want to have you back there, Brother Daniel, because we have so much to talk about. This talk is only supposed to be an hour. We probably go for the next 3. You know what I mean?
Sorry, man.
But I love this. I love this so much. But listen, before we go out, talk about the tour that you have. I'm a big travelist. That's one of my brands. I love going all over the world. I love traveling. And you have a tour that I have got to make happen. And once we get out of this COVID-19 stuff, I'm going to put that one at the top of my bucket list. Talk about the Underground Railroad tour.
So, shout out, talking once again about mentorship, Miss Assemblywoman Cheryl Brown and Miss Gloria Kinley. All right. Mm-hmm. These two individuals 20 years ago dealt with, there was a teacher in my hometown of Fontana, California, teaching kids slavery was okay and people were happy. Miss Brown, Assemblywoman Brown, got upset. This is before she was Assemblywoman. Got upset, but didn't just get upset, decided to do something about it. So she found a person in Columbus, Ohio, Gloria Kinley, who was a tour operator, one of the first African Americans on the national tour of the convention board and everything else. Put together this tour, and I've been doing it for 20 years. And we start in Maysville, Kentucky, and we go from the institution of slavery in Kentucky. We go up through Ohio, then into Michigan, cross over the Detroit River into Canada. We visit literally communities that are alive to this day of formerly enslaved people who ended up going to Canada, stayed, and are still doing work. I mean, business-wise, all that kind of stuff. Shout out to the community of Buxton, all right? And then we go from there to upstate New York, and we do everything from the Seneca Falls Convention. You guys may know that's the birthplace of the women's rights movement, but also in the room was Frederick Douglass, right? Mm-hmm. Because he understood the intersectionality of stuff. And then we go to Auburn, New York, and we're kicking it at Harriet Tubman's house. And then we go from there, and we finish the tour at the gravesite of the great Frederick, I call him Freddie D., Frederick Douglass, all right?
Wow.
And you talk about Miss Brown started that. When she became the assembly person, she backed away. Her daughter, Paulette Brown Hines, who's also on the board of the Irvine Foundation, who runs BPC Media Works, has kept everything going. Her brother, Hardy Brown, who Wilberforce graduate, used to work for Magic Johnson, used to work a bunch of other things, now really has exploded the tour. We have 4 a year, and literally we could have 8 if I had enough energy. You know what I mean? It's 8 days. It's called Footsteps to Freedom. And
Right.
it has been one of the most transformative experiences of my life. Every single year, people ask me, how can you do it? It's been 20 years and you do it, 4 times, 5 times a year. And I'm like, every experience is new because we take educators. So the buses are filled with teachers, not just history teachers, because we say that the tour is about using lessons from the Underground Railroad to teach people. Guess what? Diversity and appreciation for diversity, team building and social justice, empathy, all these things. So the vast majority of people going on the tour are not Black, but they're having an
Wow.
epiphany of an experience by being able to be immersed in these experiences and then being able to change their own lives, their teaching, their outlook on how they see the world. I mean, people come away changed, man. Not just
Mm.
a bunch of facts, but their soul is changed. So it's called Footsteps to Freedom. It's the Black Voice Foundation, which sponsors it. If you're on Facebook, you can Google Footsteps to Freedom. If you just Google it, it'll come up. But it's Footsteps to Freedom, and it is off the chain.
That's right. That's right. I love it. I love it. Now, before we get out of here, how can people contact you? What's your social media handles? Thank you so much for this rich dialogue this morning. Man, this is really great.
Yes, yes. So I am Dr. Daniel Walker on the internet, just drdanielwalker.com. I'm Dr. Daniel Walker on Instagram, and I am Dr. Daniel Walker on Facebook. All right.
All right, that's a beautiful thing. Listen, you guys can go to beachcityradio.com and see the replay of this conversation. We're going to put all of the touch points that Dr. Daniel Walker shared with us on there. Beachcityradio.com. Go ahead and support us. Lots of news on there, culturally relevant news. Lots of music on there. Lots of music, yes. And we just want to be a portal and a blessing to the culture, and that's what we're building with you guys. Thank you so much for coming out. Coffee Conversations with Greg J. Tomorrow we have Judge Maybelline coming through, and
Bam!
yes, and so we're gonna have a great time. We want to talk about justice, we want to talk about faith, and we want to talk about community. And that's tomorrow at 9 a.m. Coffee Conversations with Greg J. Any last words for the people, Brother Daniel?
Hey, I just want to give shout outs to Coffee Conversations, to Kalimba Song Coffee Company. Greg is doing it, connecting us to the diaspora. He's being what Marcus Garvey talked about, import, export, all those things. And I just want to wish you all the best, bruh. I thank you so much for bringing me on the show, but continue to do what you do, man. You are a force, you and Rhonda, the work that you do. And I just applaud you and everything that you're doing.
Yes, man. Thank you so much. And on behalf of Miss Rhonda there, we say thank you and God bless you. And everybody out there listening and watching on this, I keep wanting to call it a telecast. It's not really a telecast, is it? It's a live stream conversation. Just love one another, especially in this time. I mean, you should always love one another, but especially in this time, love is in need of love today. Love one another. Peace and blessings. All right. That's it.